Hello, I'm Kent Sangster, the artistic director and producer of the TD Edmonton International Jazz Festival. Today we are featuring an interview and performance by Bria Skonberg, who is a Juno-nominated vocalist and trumpet player, originally from Chilliwack, BC, currently residing in New York City. We hope you enjoy this online experience. Thank you for tuning in. Well, first of all, Bria, it's great to see you and see you again. How many years ago was it we first presented you in Edmonton? Do you remember? I should remember this. I should know this.
I believe it was 2015.
Okay.
I remember because I was touring with a band that featured a couple other Canadians at that time. I had my college buddies Evan Artson and Sean Cronin in the band. So
Right.
I remember that being around that time.
Right. I bring that up because it's certainly one of the highlights of my involvement in the festival, which dates back now 15 years, and it certainly was one of the highlight performances for me. And it was one of the main reasons why I was excited to try to present you this year. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But I would also just like to state for the record that we are fully committed to having you back for 2021 live. So let's all hope that that's going to happen.
Great.
Yeah, but tell us how are you doing and like specifically, where are you located right now?
Sure. Well, right now I'm in New York City. I've been living here since 2010. It's no secret. I'm very proud that I grew up in Chilliwack in British
Mm-hmm.
Columbia. I lived in Vancouver. I went to Capilano University's jazz program, and I was there until 2010. So I moved to New York, and I've been here throughout this whole pandemic. So as you can see, I've had to improvise as we do, and I've got now the home office set up a little bit more. I've been uh, teaching, playing, working on videos and different things, and I'm just really grateful for people such as yourself and organizations that are like, well, this can't happen, but what can we do? You know, it's not what can't we do, but what can we do instead? So this is nice. Thank you.
Oh, our pleasure. And I agree with that in terms of it's sometimes a little easier to just kind of say, well, we can't do this, but at the same time, we need to say what can we do, and kind of push the envelope whenever we can. Um, I just thought just a simple question, but what inspired you to get into music in the first place?
Well, my parents were always good at making my brother, my sister, and I in getting us involved in a lot of different activities. So
Okay.
from a young age, it was dance or it was sports. I played soccer, and then we played musical instruments. I actually started on piano lessons. Also because my grandma, my father's mother, she played a lot by ear. So we had pianos in the house. We always had instruments, even though nobody really took it up professionally in my family, nobody else. But yeah, so there were always instruments around, always definitely a love of music. My parents loved dancing. We'd go to social community events where music was featured, live music. And my brother actually picked up a fiddle. So some of my earliest memories of music are all based around, the Canadian tradition of Celtic music and going to these fiddle competitions where they'd play a waltz, a jig, and a reel, and everybody would dance and have a good old hold down. And so that was always fun. Music's always been community based for me. And then as I, just got older and started to try out instruments for the band program, that's basically where I picked up the trumpet. My dad encouraged me to play. He played back in high school. We owned a trumpet, and I started playing in grade 7 public school band. Yay, public schools.
Oh, great. I'm a saxophone player, but I have a trumpet, and every once in a while I think I can play it because I've often said to myself, if I got a chance to do this all over again, I would prefer to be a trumpet player. So, because I have the utmost respect for them, because it's harder than saxophone. Couple of other things. So who would you say are your main influences in your music?
Well, I think one of my biggest influences musically from the start, at least from on my journey with jazz, has been Louis Armstrong,
Hmm.
peering over my shoulder back there.
Right.
And I was introduced to his music again by the band teachers in Chilliwack because Chilliwack had a jazz festival. It was a traditional jazz festival, though. It focused a lot on the early styles of jazz. I got what I understand now to be a very rare training in 1900 to 1930s foundational New Orleans style playing, which features a lot of collective improvisation, strong melodies, strong rhythmic grooves. and quite honestly, very challenging music as I was trying to play this guy's solos at 15 or so. So Louis has always been one of my biggest influences, just not just as a trumpet player, obviously a singer and a communicator, and also a human being. He was a wonderful humanitarian. And now that I live in New York City, I actually have a really good relationship with the Louis Armstrong house where he lived
Hmm.
in Queens. They have a backyard series, they've got concerts, and I've been working with them developing educational programs. So, how about that? It
Wow,
just keeps going. Yeah.
that's
So,
fantastic.
so he's been one of my biggest influences. And along the way, I've had some incredible mentors. Uh, I actually didn't have a private teacher until I got to Capilano, but I studied with Kevin Olaschuk and Alan Matheson. These are wonderful jazz artists in Vancouver. Simon Stribling was one of my biggest mentors. And when I moved to New York, I started studying with a man named Warren Vacher, who kicked my butt and still does.
I'm sure. Ironically, Kevin and I know Kevin because he's originally from Edmonton.
That's right, of
And
course.
um, and I'll tell you one little thing is that the very first time that I attempted to play jazz outside of a school program was with Kevin and a drummer named Owen Howard and a few other people. And I remember literally standing next to Kevin and saying, "So what is it that we're supposed to do here?" And Kevin is a very fine player, and there's an
Kevin,
interesting
he's
small
an
world.
incredible creative soul, and I just think again, I not having had a private teacher, I just came into university as a big mixed bag of raw materials, and he had to make some sense out of it.
Right.
So he was very patient, and now being farther down my path, I just realized how insightful and how incredibly beautiful and nuanced his music is.
Yeah, he knows a lot. He knows a lot about the music for sure. Well, one thing that I would say that I'm have learnt about you is that, and especially with your newer music, is that clearly you are stated in the tradition, but you do have other things up your sleeve, so to speak, musically, and maybe you could talk about that because, where do you get your current inspirations for some of your original compositions?
Well, yes, first of all, uh, I've never been one to, want to stay in one place for very long.
Hmm?
I think maybe because I'm a third child too. I like to stir up the pot a little bit along the way. So again, I had this incredible foundational knowledge of traditional jazz, and I went to Capilano and further enhanced that with the roots of jazz. But I also I'm a millennial. I listened to so many different kinds of music growing up. I listened to hip hop, rock, disco, classic rock, especially. I was in a ska band. I like a lot of different kinds of music. I really treat it like food. I want to try everything, and ultimately, unless you get an allergic reaction, I'll try it again and just try to work those variables that interest me into the music. It's more than just sounds. It's about people and life and stories, and I've managed to stay open throughout all these adventures to whatever else can come in, because I just feel like there's just the more you learn, the more there is to gain, and the more people that you meet, the more that you can benefit and enhance your perspective on life and beyond. So all of that to say, uh, I have a lot of influences with my music. Focusing that into a cohesive statement is sometimes the tricky part for me. But I've been fortunate to work with some great producers along the way as well. It's been a challenge, not just juggling one instrument, the trumpet, but also I sing a lot, and so finding the place where both of those voices can be themselves, express themselves, and finding songs or writing songs that can act as vehicles to show both of those off has been an interesting journey. So if you had, what Louis said again, he says, what we play is life. So I take inspiration from pretty much every experience that I have. I keep my ears open, I keep my heart open, and uh, and then when I write music, so how that has influenced my more recent music is I really have to create space to sift through it all. To be honest, the way that I write music is to sit at the keyboard over the trumpet, because piano is a harmony instrument. You can play more than one note at a time, and I just wait. I just sit there in silence, and I wait and see what comes out. To see, basically, yeah, just let the music sit. It's been sitting in me for a while, and and it might just be following, chasing some sounds along, waiting for a lyric to appear, going along with that idea and developing it over time. Those are the ways that I take it in, it melts in here, and then I give it a vehicle, such as a piano, to come out.
Villain Vanguard. Tell us about that.
Well, Villain Vanguard is a perfect example of the process I was talking about before, about how I write songs. The whole album, Nothing Never Happens. Well, let me start with the title. I'll unpack the title a little bit, which will lead its way to the song. So not even 2 years ago, I just got so overwhelmed by all what I call the white noise, all the input of the media. We all know what I'm talking about. Real news, fake news, talking heads, so much stuff. You just could not escape it, especially for traveling. There's just TV screens in every airport all the time. And I was just feeling really bogged down and overwhelmed by, number one, the amount of it, and also just the lack of space to process all of those things and find some feelings about it. I feel stressed, I feel tense, but I don't know why. It's like I don't have any outlets for it. So I took myself, I say, off the grid for a little while, and I went on a couple of writing retreats, sat in silence, let some songs come out. And honestly, Villain Vanguard is the first song that came out when I went through that process. I had just attended the Women's March, I think it was the second one in New York City, and with a few million of my best friends, we were thinking about equality, of course, just the voice of that movement, the Me Too movement, obviously the hierarchy that's going on here in the United States. All of that got channeled into this song, Villain Vanguard, which to me is like a protest. There are moments of structure, and there are moments where it's just free at the same time. And my instruction to the band in those moments are, pretend that you're a person in this crowd, and what do you hear, what do you feel, play that at this moment. So the music itself has been very cathartic, and to pull that together just with the other alternate idea of the title of Nothing Never Happens, it is a double negative. It means to say there's a silver lining in here. The opposite of nothing never happens is that something always happens. Something always happens. So you have to push through, be optimistic, surround yourself with good people, and we will get through it together.
That's great. Yeah, I compose myself, but it's like the thought that you put into your music is very impressive. There's lots of insight there. So thank you for that.
This is an original song called Villain Vanguard.
So, are focusing on any particular artist or inspiration right now? In terms of like, I guess I could ask you, what CD was the last one you bought? But that's a while ago. We don't buy CDs anymore. So what's on your playlist?
What
Like
are you
what's
talking about? I have CDs for sale. No. Yeah. I don't, but maybe you do. Yes, well, again, if we had this conversation 3 months ago, it might have been totally different. I would say,
you
oh,
know
I saw this band and it was live.
right? What's this week?
This week, I should look at my playlist. An artist that I'm really inspired by right now, and maybe because I've been forced to figure out again what can I do and layer do videos, is Jacob Collier.
Mm-hmm.
He's an incredibly gifted, but beyond gifted, hardworking individual,
Yes.
and I've really enjoyed uh, listening to his music and checking out videos, his approach to harmony and beyond. I know that a piano player I play with often, who I believe is supposed to come to Edmonton, his name is Matisse Picard, and they went to school together when they were just kids. And he has a similar kind of, again, approach, or just all this deep, deep knowledge of harmony. So I've been inspired by Jacob Collier a lot recently.
Oh, very interesting and good choice for sure. Bria, do you remember when your first concert was? Like what you would kind of consider your first moment of like a professional concert?
Professional.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I could define it by, yeah, but what was your first gig?
I was going back to 3-year-old dance things. We don't want to go there. We don't. There's no
Right,
baby
right.
that time. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
My first professional gig was when I was 15 years old. I I had been invited to play with a band out of Abbotsford called the Moonlighters, and like so many great, again, communities, it was mostly public school teachers or,
Hmm.
people that played on the side. That said, it was, part of the Turner dynasty. Al Turner, Brad Turner went through it, Kerry Turner was in it, all of, those,
Okay.
uh, those people were there. And it was Bob Brown, the drummer, who really invited me in. And I remember that. I remember playing with him a lot because we'd commute together, and he'd always make me tapes of big band music to listen to. So he was very instrumental in my listening. Anyway, the first gig, so we'd play social dances maybe like 2 or 3 times a year. So my first gig was in some hotel ballroom in Abbotsford, and I think I made $50, and I spent it in advance on the black sparkly dress,
There we go. Well,
playing third trumpet and singing.
well, you've mentioned quite a bit now. You made reference to like the rich culture on the west coast of Canada, and I've long thought that there actually has to be something in the water there. Like something is. I mean, and I'm well aware that there's lots of very, very dedicated educators, but there's for people who don't know this, some of the finest jazz musicians that we have abroad. I mean, Toronto, you can just find lots and lots and lots of people who have come from BC and people like yourself living in New York. And so that to me is, I've always wondered why that is, but you've just described there's a lineage and there's people who really have supported young people, obviously, and giving them a chance and giving them the tools. But it also takes hard work on your part to get to where you've gone, and you're clearly working really hard.
Thank you.
Tell us about Blackbird Fantasy. Tell us about that because it's wonderful, and I think there's lots to talk about there.
Sure. Well, so Blackbird Fantasy, it's a mashup of two songs that already exist. I think, like you said, and I know I am based in tradition, but we want to continue to move it forward with some new ideas and reinforce new and old messages. So Blackbird Fantasy is a mashup of Duke Ellington's uh, Black and Tan Fantasy and the Beatles, Blackbird. And that idea came to me because I was doing this actually some outreach for Jazz at Lincoln Center. I go into schools and we teach different movements, social movements that have happened. We go back to some of the same schools a couple times per year. The first one's about jazz and democracy. The second one is jazz and the Harlem Renaissance and the Harlem and the Great Migration. And the third session is about jazz in the civil rights era, which again, growing up in Canada has just been an extremely incredible education to absorb, first of all, Jazz Lincoln Center's ideas and to try to teach those to kids, and just super humbling at the same time. I want to do it with respect, and but looking at those different times, and of course, and the time that we live in right now, history repeats itself. It continues to go on, and there are heroes along the way and messages that we want to continue to uplift. So Black and Tan Fantasy is from that era, the Harlem Renaissance, Duke Ellington, incredible African-American band leader, really an icon in jazz and beyond. And it features a trumpet player named Bubber Miley with a lot of plunger work, which is right up my alley as a trumpet player and my stylistic choices.
Right.
And Blackbird by the Beatles was actually a comment during the civil rights era across the pond about what was going on in the US. So I thought about those messages and how they, how they intersect and how they support each other, how it's still relevant today, and then the process of putting a song, making a mashup, is like a puzzle to me, where I analyze the melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic components of each song and figure out how you could possibly fit them together. So that sort of thing is fun for me too. It's a really beautiful moment when you have ideas and you put them on paper, but eventually when you hear the band play them, I think at the first rehearsals I was like, yes, it works. Oh wait, that part didn't work. Okay, I'm going to change that. But overall, that's it. And yeah, and I like the nuance. Ultimately, they come together as a blues. Blues, which is the deepest form of music and the foundation of jazz, and something that is universal.
Right. I mean, very well said. I mean, musically, I really enjoyed it, but this explains much more of the meaning behind it. Could you tell us a little bit about your band?
Sure. Oh, I miss them so much.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
Every time I every time I play piano. Well, this on this video, this is taken at a record release party that I had for my latest album, Nothing Never Happens, and this song is on there. And that means that it's my most ideal band. It's a whole six-piece. Nope, it's five on this one, sorry. Band is Darian Douglas on drums. We've been playing together for at least 8 years now. Devin Starks on bass, incredible guy. He's been in my band for about 2 or 3 years. On the piano is a man named Ben Patterson. He's incredible, and he's also playing Hammond organ. One of the things that makes this
Yep.
album different from my last ones is there's just some more gritty elements to it. So there's Hammond organ with piano, as well as guitar, which, again, I haven't featured in my bands very often. And Doug Womble is on guitar, and he's a phenomenal, versatile guy. And they're all nice people, which is important to me as a band leader. So please enjoy Blackbird Fantasy as seen at the New York City Jazz Standard.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life, you're only waiting for this moment to rise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life, you're only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly. Blackbird fly. Blackbird fly into the light of a dark black night. Into the light of a dark black night.
The TD Edmonton International Jazz Festival would like to thank Bria Skonberg for sharing such a wonderful performance with us today. Please visit edmontonjazz.com for more of your online jazz experiences.